All right, ready? Okay. Okay, so one more time, good afternoon. And I am glad to be leading this panel, which I find very interesting for myself. I am Manuel DeLeon, and I do have a heavy accent, okay, because English is my second language. So if you do not understand what I am saying, just ask, okay? And the panel, we have today in the panel, Bunmi, pardon me, I'm sorry, Akkinsoutu. Did I get it right? No, sorry.
You did just fine.
Okay, I apologize. And she's a deputy director for Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Program. Bunmi is the foreign policy enthusiast and organizational management leader. As the deputy director of the Rangel Fellowship at Howard University, Bunmi builds the talent pipeline of foreign service officers and international affairs leaders. Prior to Howard, Bunmi was the chief of staff at Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, which also amplifies the voices of rising global policymakers. She was a political appointee in the Obama administration, where she served as a special assistant in the Office of Land and Emergency Management and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. There, she coordinated international and domestic efforts to advance resource conservation and bring greater visibility to the social and economic benefits of reducing negative environmental impacts. Bunmi's international journey began at Search for Common Ground in Timor-Leste, and she later taught English in Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. Prior to her career in foreign affairs, Bunmi was a nonprofit fundraiser for the UIWCA and United Way in Chicago. She's also an AmeriCorps alum, a Trauma National Security Fellow, and a Penn Campbell Democracy Fellow. Bunmi obtained her master's degree in public administration from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs, and also a master's in sociology from Illinois State University, Stimson Center for Applied Community and Economic Development. She received her bachelor's degree in computer information systems from Bryant University, located in her home state of Rhode Island. Bunmi is a recovering collegiate volleyball player, loves anything made of red velvet, anything from Chicago, and enjoys producing her radio program and podcast, What in the World? She is relentless in her pursuit to help more Americans understand the connection of foreign policy to their everyday lives. Next, we have Regan Kwan, research associate at the Stimson Center. Kwan is a research associate with the Southeast Asia Program and the Energy, Water, and Sustainability Program. His research focuses on the environmental and socioeconomic impact of development in the greater Mekong region. He manages the technical aspect of the Mekong Infrastructure Tracker project and leads the program's data collection and management processes. Before joining the Stimson Center, he worked as a consultant and research assistant at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. Regan also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco. He holds an MPP from the University of California, San Diego, and ABA from the University of California, Los Angeles. Beth Aszabolenski is a director of student recruiting and admissions at the University of Michigan, Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. Beth Aszabolenski serves as the Associate Director of Student and Academic Services at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy in the University of Michigan. In this role, Beth is responsible for the oversight of all Ford school recruiting and admission processes and events. She also represents the Ford School of Graduate Fairs and other student recruitment events, and served as the Ford School Admission representative in professional organizations such as the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, the Association for Public Policy Analysis and Management, and NASPAA. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. She's also a member of the board of directors for the Public Policy and International Affairs Program. As part of the first recruitment strategy, Beth develops and maintains our partnership programs with organizations such as Teach for America, AmeriCorps, and the Peace Corps. She also supervises the admission office staff. Beth holds a BS in Public Administration from Auckland University, as well as an MPP degree from the Ford School. And lastly, myself, one more time, I am Manuel DeLeon, Assistant Professor of Political Science and International Studies at Bethune Cookman University here in Daytona Beach, Florida. I am a proud alumnus from the Florida Community College system, where I learned my English. All right, very proud of it. I have a doctorate in philosophy from Florida International University in Miami, Florida. And like I said, I am a professor of political science and international studies in Bethune Cookman University, which is an HBCU, an African American college. University, I'm sorry. I teach international political economy, international security studies, international development studies, diplomacy, international law, among other disciplines. I am also the advisor, career and graduate school advisor for political science and international studies majors. I research, my research is mostly in sanction regimes, as instruments of coercive diplomacy. I like to publish op-eds in the Hispanic media here in Florida. And in my spare times, I like to write short stories, fiction, and I paint. I do some painting. I also love jazz in vinyl records, okay? Without any delay, let me move ahead to start the panel with some questions for you to consider, beginning with Ms. Bunmi. Can you start, please?
Sure. Did you want me to just speak on the opportunities with the Wrangle program?
Yes, exactly, yes.
Perfect, perfect. Well, hello, everyone. And I want to steal just a little bit of like 20 seconds or less, actually less. If people are comfortable, I'd love to see videos, because I know that we're all zoomed out and tired of this platform. It's always nice to see faces in these sessions, so I know someone's alive on the other side. And I'm not just talking to, but I also understand if that's not what you want to do, because you're like, I'm in my pajamas and in my bed, I don't have time. So yes, thank you, Manuel, for moderating Bunmi Akkinsoutu. And I am the Deputy Director of the Wrangle program based out of Howard University in Washington, DC. I'm not sure who all is familiar with the Wrangle, maybe with the thumbs up or something chat if you're familiar with it, so I know the level of detail I need to get into. Okay, so the Wrangle program, along with the Pickering, so I'm going to mention the two together. The Wrangle and Pickering program are both housed at Howard University. We're funded by the Department of State to provide the State Department really access to outstanding young people, not young, but anybody who are interested in becoming Foreign Service officers at the Department of State. And the whole mission is to ensure that we bring excellence and diversity, a true representation of the United States into the diplomatic corps at the Department of State. So the Wrangle and the Pickering program provide financial assistance, mentorship, and preparation for all of the fellows to enter into the Foreign Service after 2 years of completing their graduate school program, and also assuming they meet all of the State Department security clearance requirements and program requirements. So I won't take up too much time because I know we've got to go through everybody else, but that's the Wrangle program, graduate fellowship, the summer enrichment program. We're going to talk about maybe pipeline programs at some point, but the summer enrichment program is an undergraduate program that exposes young people to careers in international affairs. And we do so before COVID. They are here in Washington, D.C. for 6 weeks, and they visit various organizations around town, meet with various professionals, participate in seminars, a writing seminar. They take classes at Howard related to international affairs and the political economy. And through that experience, the Wrangle scholars, what we call them, are able to get a sense for where they fit in terms of international affairs careers, whether it's through the Foreign Service, whether it's going straight to graduate school, whether it's working at a think tank, doing development work, so on and so forth. So if you have young people that you're advising and they're just looking to figure out what they want to do with this space, the Summer Enrichment Program, the Wrangle Scholars Program, as we call it, is a good place to start. So I'm happy to give more detail later, but I'll stop there so my colleagues can chime in as well.
Okay, next, would you like to jump in, Regan Kwan?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I feel a little underqualified considering the accolades of my co-panelists. I guess I've never been on the recruiting end of anything for undergrads in particular on a larger scale, like programmatically speaking. But I have experiences as Manuel spoke about, joining Peace Corps, doing several fellowships, having a quarter life crisis right before going back to grad school, which I didn't expect. Going, like finding my own path to financing grad school and undergrad. Also doing community college, not because like it was cheaper. I mean, it was, but also because I just didn't excel academically until probably college. But also like doing community college during the recession, so it all kind of helped a lot. It made that process a lot easier. And it's something that I assume undergraduates continue to experience. And I, most of the time whenever I'm put in these positions, I do speak candidly about my experiences. It's never as happy-go-lucky as people expect it, especially with Peace Corps, especially with the hurdles of Peace Corps. And if anyone's been keeping up with the recent news about Peace Corps experiences, that's something that's not relatively unfortunately new. So these are things that I do bring up as part of my experience. Within the scope, like I wasn't directly involved in anything or experienced anything, but these are things that I always keep in mind and make sure that people I talk to also are aware of a more holistic experience of what can happen, rather than just giving them some pieces of paper and going read about it or do this or that.
Okay, what about you, Beth?
Thanks, Manuel. So I really appreciate you all taking time to hang out with us for a little while. And I do recruiting for a living, and I know the challenges that students have in making the leap into graduate school. And cost is definitely very high, very high on the list, but certainly not the only thing. So I'm happy to talk with you all and give some suggestions. My colleagues, with the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps and Wrangle, right? Those are all programs that I strongly encourage your students, because those all help pay for graduate school. But I'm also, Manuel might have mentioned that I was on the board for PPIA, Public Policy and International Affairs. I don't know, has anybody heard of that program? Perfect. So PPIA is also another pipeline program for folks that are interested in the field of policy, also providing, training for students to become strong applicants for graduate school, but also many of our students get significant financial assistance, fellowship assistance for graduate school. So another potential path. So just looking forward to sort of hearing your questions and talking about possibilities for your students and how we can connect and help them along that journey if that's what they are, if that's what they think they'd like to do. So really glad to be here.
Right. Okay, so I teach international relations and American foreign policy, and I tell my students, anything we do here in the US has negative and positive consequences around the world. Because we got the largest economy, the largest military, we are the most industrialized nation in the world. And so it is a very important career and exciting in my view. Why is it that we cannot get enough students to serve as foreign policy makers in foreign policy agencies, even the Department of State? Anything about that you can tell us, you can share with us? Why is it that we cannot get enough students? Is it the money? Is it the risk, the application process? Do I actually have to have a daddy in the Senate to get a job in Washington, D.C.? Tell us. And I don't mean to be sarcastic. Many of my students do believe that you gotta know someone to get that good job in Washington, D.C.
I'm happy to chime in briefly here. I actually don't think that that's too far from the truth. I'll just say that maybe they don't have to be your daddy or your mama or something, but certainly being in Washington brings you closer to the center of power, which makes it easier to go on coffees, to do internships, to attend conferences, to be close to where the action is. So for students who are not located within the Beltway, that's difficult to do, right? Picking up the phone is not the same thing nowadays, the level playing field is even, right? Because everybody's virtual. So, but before COVID, certainly picking up the phone is not the same thing as being able to attend a happy hour with a particular organization, right? And get to interact with someone from Stimson Center or to go to a panel event. So I think that there's some truth to students' anxiety about who you know. Like, I think that's actually, there's some truth to that. I'll also say that from my experience as someone who doesn't have a politically connected family, everyone in my family is in fact in the medical space. From my brother, my father, my mother. My father was an engineer, but again, immigrant family, so you go where the money is. So when I'm the only one of my family who's in this policy space, and I got here through graduate school, and I took the risk. I wouldn't recommend this for every student, but I took on the debt and the risk to switch in the hopes that somebody would see that I was a fit for foreign policy. And it wasn't a straight line. So I think for a lot of students, I think the fear, if it's anything to what I experienced, is because the line is not straight, there's a sense of uncertainty. And because the risk is so high, you fall back, right? And you go towards the path that seems a little less risky and expensive and gray. And again, if you don't have a network, if you're not even in a community that has a diplomat in residence or anybody talking about international anything, it can be just a mysterious space altogether. So if you do have a student who's willing to take on that path, it likely is also very just scary for them because it is not a linear, predictable career. And there are risks, I think, both financially and personally that you take on that maybe your family may not ever truly understand.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'll just hop on real quick. You know, Bunmi is right. You know, like the leap into graduate school is a big, big step and it's very expensive, but there are experiences that you could encourage your students to consider that I think could help them figure out if it's the right path for them. I mean, we talked about Peace Corps, right? Peace Corps, with all of its warts and everything, it's an in-country experience that you can't replace. And if a student is really interested in international affairs, in-country experience is incredibly valuable. So that's a way that they could get that without, you know, I mean, they're not going to make a lot of money, but, you know, they're not going to go into debt either. So I think any of those experiential programs are terrific ways for your students to learn more about the field. You know, we all mentioned programs that are sort of pipeline programs, but they are competitive and it can be really challenging. But I will just, and I expect you all know this already, but I think the thing that I see with our students, our undergraduate students, you know, even if they apply for that one fellowship and they don't get it, but then, right, that gives them experience for the next one and the next one. And it becomes sort of a cumulative effect that they refine their pitch and they refine their materials. So hopefully, ultimately, they'll get where they want to go. So even not being successful in those early rounds, you're still gaining experience and background that I think is really helpful.
Yeah, if I could add on really quickly, I agree with both of them. It's something I've noticed was, you know, being from LA and just growing up on the West Coast, there's a huge disconnect between policy positions and pretty much everyone on the West Coast. And that's, you know, about 10 to 15% of the population. At UCLA, UCSD, we're not going to get those big policy organizations aside from, like, you know, I can name off maybe 5 in my hand, just that are big enough to be noted. So there's that disconnect between a whole system of education on the West Coast and the East Coast, but more specifically the DMV area. So I think, you know, that location, and it's mostly, I think, an access issue. But that also goes to something I've noticed working in DC for the past year now, is there's a lack of diversity. I'm not going to see a lot of Black colleagues who are also in research and policy. And that's just something that I'm sadly not surprised by, because there's that lack of access and you know, knowledge about how to connect people to the right organizations and get that kind of exposure to policy that they may not know they're interested in. And then something else I also was thinking about was it's just getting harder to get into these programs. I think it's at this point, you kind of like, yeah, you need grad school now. Not only do you need grad school, you also need to do Peace Corps. Not only do you need grad school Peace Corps, you also need to do more and more and more. So, I mean, that's not saying that it's a bad thing, because it just means, you know, maybe we are creating more efficient, more proficient diplomats or what have you. But that is also, you know, if there's a discrepancy between who's getting access to that level of education and who's going into the program, then yeah, you're going to see that a certain type of people are always going to get a position relative to others.
Yes, after 10 years working in a African American college or university, I can tell you what I get is that they are more interested in domestic policy than foreign policy. They want more public administration, working here in local government, state government, than actually, well, you know, China and Russia are far away from us. We deal with them sometime later, but right now we want to deal here with the problems we have here. That's what I get for the most part. Actually, my political science program, we get about 70 students. We have a total of average of 3,000 students per year in the entire university, out of which about 60, 70 students in political science, and they all want to be lawyers, okay, right? And then we have about 40 in international affairs, and yes, they do want to go to to work in foreign affairs, but they want to do also academia, like teaching, you know, for which they need a PhD, right? Eventually. So in their eyes, it is a long shot. They might not get there. So they gotta have a plan B. And I can tell you, I get many of these young students crying in my office because their parents want them to do something else. Okay, and they tell me they like foreign affairs, they want to work in American foreign policy, but their parents are telling them go this route. Okay, so it is a challenge, especially when they have to spend so much money on this career, right? So can you share any experience about that? Do you have you ever had that kind of experience with your students?
Yeah, all the time with the Wrangle scholars. And I will say that the way, particularly your point about addressing the pull toward domestic issues, I don't try to convince them, you know, one way or the other. What I tell them is that everything has a globalized lens, everything. It doesn't matter if it's urban planning, if it's justice, if it's healthcare. Obviously with this pandemic, right, we're seeing how things have played out on an international level. I think my approach with the Wrangle scholars in particular, who are leaning more towards domestic careers, is I say, look, go for it if you want to work. I had a call with a scholar who's like, you know, I really want to do urban planning. I'm not going to argue with you on that. His whole idea was urban planning is connected to a lot of the issues in his community. Absolutely true. He made that connection. So I was like, but you know, this is not something unique to the United States. This is an issue in Brazil. This is an issue in London. This is an issue in South Africa. This is an issue in lots of places. And so if you want to get an edge up on your colleagues who are coming in also wanting to do urban planning, look at it internationally and look at the best practices globally. Look at the skill sets that other people in other countries are developing. Learn a language so that if you want to go to a conference in India about urban planning, maybe you learn the language, or you go to Spain and you learn, right? By having that international edge, you are setting yourself apart from colleagues who are hyper-focused on what's happening, say, in the South Bronx or what's happening in Chicago, right? So I think that as advisors, it's not our job to necessarily force, kind of like the parents, like force international affairs, but to lend a complementary perspective that can hopefully get them to see that there's a way to do both without actually committing to becoming, like, say, a foreign service officer, right? Because not everybody wants to travel the world every 2 years. Some people actually don't want to leave the country, and that's totally fine. But I think that as advisors, we can only just offer them a different way to get a leg up using just having a globalized perspective.
Right. Any other experience?
I think the other thing I think Bunmi is actually absolutely right about this, but you know, maybe a master's in international affairs isn't the right answer for that particular student, but maybe a master in public policy is. You know, I think there's sometimes really artificial lines drawn between international policy and domestic policy. And of course, these students are going to be interested in helping their community. You know, I mean, at a place like Ford, you know, you can mix and match your electives as you want. So you can take some domestic and some international, and you can learn a language, and you could, right? So you can mix and match. That's true at a lot of policy schools, right? So maybe if they're struggling with that, maybe one of those degrees that gives them a little more flexibility, right? That doesn't require you to come in with a couple of years of foreign language and that sort of stuff might be a better path for them. They can still end up in places like the State Department or USAID or whatever, but it's a different path and it gives them more flexibility. So that might be something for them to consider.
Right.
Yeah, if I could quickly add back to Manuel's comment about parents. So I'm a first generation college graduate. My parents still don't speak English to this day. They've been here for 3 decades. They're stubborn. They don't need to. They're in a great community where they could just speak Cantonese for the rest of their lives and not worry about it. But it's something where there is an actual language barrier between understanding what I do and what I want to do, and what their hopes and dreams for me are. And there weren't resources available on an institutional level to do that. But I still don't believe an institutional answer would have helped, because it would have just been a piece of paper or a booklet explaining, like, this is what public policy means, this is what foreign affairs means. And that's not something that immigrants would really connect with. It would be someone they're familiar with, specifically their child or someone from their community, talking to them like, hey, these are opportunities that they have now, given that you sacrificed so much, you came here, you did this and this. It's what are the opportunities for them now? Is like, do you want them to do what you want them to do, or do you want them to do what they want to do? So that, there's that disconnect. It can be an actual language barrier, but it can also just be ideology, understanding. It can be so many things, and I just don't, I don't think existing frameworks function within that. Yeah, that's just something that a lot of my friends also deal with.
Yes, for immigrants, it is even, I would say it is even worse. I am myself one of them. And I can tell you, when I told my family 30 years ago that I wanted to go back to school, they told me, no, you come to the US to work and make money, okay? School is for somebody else, not for you. And that's what I got in the community, right? They would look at me like, you're going to school? Yes, and so it is very hard, even harder for immigrants, I would say, and the ignorance in good meaning, meaning not knowing what is the opportunities that there are out there. There are plenty of opportunities. We may not qualify for those opportunities, but they are there, right? For those who are informed, who know about those opportunities, and the language is a barrier, no questions about that, and the stigma also, right, of going back to school and those things, right? What about traveling abroad? What about study abroad programs? How important are they for these careers in American foreign policy? Any experience you would like to share?
I can start it off this time. So I think I've had about 4 to 5 experiences through either university or government organization or government for international experience. It started off with just a month in Paris. Great starting place. Like, you can't really mess that up. It's a month in Paris. What can go wrong? But then it kind of like you get that bug, and that's really where it comes from. That first experience you get in a new country with a foreign language, people you've never met before, and just hopefully being able to enjoy parts of that experience, so that it gets you going. That what else is there out there? And that really led to Peace Corps. I think was kind of the first step, and Peace Corps was really that first. Yeah, it was the first time where I was really had no agenda, just go in and just try to do something. I mean, that's like a one-line sentence for what Peace Corps is: just try to do something and don't do any harm. And it was that kind of blank template that really allowed me to explore like what my comforts were and what I could do to the extent of my limits and experiences and knowledge, to try to help. And that I think Peace Corps probably has the most benefit on the people who join Peace Corps. It's a very individual growth experience. There are obviously like externalities, like you're helping the community, you're teaching, you're whatnot, but it's really a personal experience. And the people I think who come back from it always have a different perspective of life and what they're going to do in the future. I think it can change someone's trajectory because you have so much time on hand to just focus on your work and on yourself, and how to just be a better person in a community that may not really connect with you completely. So it's a way of you trying to empathize, sympathize with a culture that you're not familiar with, and that's really great. And then I have more experiences after that in grad school to go to Kenya and India for a couple of months on a fellowship and just working. In this case, this was more of a professional experience, just actually working in public policy, doing some of the things I learned in grad school and putting that to use. And for me, it was more figuring out, is this the kind of work I want to do? Or is this something that, I know I've tried it for a month, I probably won't like it for X amount of years, let's try something else. So it was that opportunity that I think was the best way to use my time, given that it was going to be financed by some organization, which is, it's a privilege, but also very lucky for me to be in a kind of position.
Right.
Yeah,
Go
sorry, no, I wanted to share that a barrier and here's the solution. So for me, in college, I was an athlete. I played volleyball at a Division II school, pretty competitive. I was on a partial scholarship, and I wanted to study abroad in Australia my junior year, and I did not get a chance to go. This would have been 2001 or 2002. At that time, the amount of resources, financial resources that were available to students to study abroad were not nearly as plentiful as they are today. So solution, right? So I have relatives, I have students who I come across who are afraid that if they study abroad, they'll be giving up their scholarship if they're an athlete, or they can't afford it, or there's just some other financial barrier. So what I offer is, if the student wants to study abroad, there are so many financial resources. At Howard, I don't work with the study abroad team, but they are, we in the office, we have a rack full of just funding opportunities. And so I encourage you to talk to your students about doing just a quick Google search about any of these, but just funding for study abroad. There's money out there and it should not be a barrier. With the second point, our programs, the Wrangle and Pickering programs, we do not require study abroad experience, although many participants have it. So if you have a student who's looking at our program and hasn't ever left the United States, that's totally fine. So long as they can demonstrate a commitment to service and leadership in the community, we'll take care of the rest once they become fellows, and certainly once they become a diplomat. That's another story, right? They are in the world for the rest of their lives, hopefully. So if you have students who are apprehensive about studying abroad, please assure them that if they apply to our fellowships, that's not a precursor to success.
Right. I think I mentioned it before we began the meeting. I had 2 students accepted in the Rangel program, and none of them had ever been out of the US at all. Okay, the farther away they had gone was Florida. Really, and yes, and it was an ordeal to persuade their parents that it is a good program and nothing is going to happen to them. They are safe, safer than wandering the streets of America, probably, right? Yes, but the curiosity is there. I do see the curiosity for learning if the program is good for them. And going abroad, traveling abroad also, many of them want to travel abroad, most of them to Europe, like if, the other side of the world didn't exist, right? But again, the lack of information to them, right? And trusting that information. I think I said yesterday, I spent hours talking to my students, trying to persuade them that it is okay to go abroad. And actually, it is very important. It is an education in itself, I think, because you learn so much from other cultures, and diversity, languages, entertainment, fashion, food, so much to learn when you actually go beyond the United States, right? But again, you know, the trust is not there, and I have to do the convincing, you know, the persuasion side of it. Okay, and any comment about that?
I guess I can add again more to my Peace Corps experience. I would like to say that it's kind of a thing where the interview, if you go through the entire process, the interview, you will get a placement, because the process itself is weeding people out, because it is about a 9 to 12 month process, and as long as you are financially, physically, and mentally safe or well, you will have a placement. And I think the reason being is that they just want young Americans specifically, but almost any, I mean, there's no age. I think the upper age limit is like 70. They just want Americans to experience it, just to try it out and share, you know, American goals, values, etc., and just play a positive role in a community that is foreign to them. So I think when people think about that, or when people think about applying for Peace Corps, you know, they probably most often think like they don't qualify because they don't have the experiences, they don't speak a foreign language. A lot of that's not really necessary. Peace Corps will place you in a country they feel you fit most in, and you know, I think it's good to come at that from that kind of perspective. Like, just try it out. It's going to take you 9 months to get through it. If you start it now at your final year, or you're 3 months into your senior year, you're probably going to get it somewhere when you graduate. But most people don't. It's going to still take graduation plus X months. So the process, you know, if at any moment you want to stop and you find a job, you can. No one's losing out on that, as long as you just try and apply for it, help them along with that process, because it is a really grueling process. I mean, I know Peace Corps has recruiters, and I know there are campus recruiters now, so there are a lot of resources out there. There's also a lot of support groups. The Return Peace Corps volunteer groups are also out there, and there's just a lot of activities and events that go on that kind of hopefully bring light to more of the experiences of applying and getting a position, and knowing how it feels, and knowing what it would feel like when you're kind of in limbo for 9 to 10 months, because that's probably going to happen to everyone who applies.
Right. Yeah. I also think that I can be wrong, but this generation wants everything right now. Waiting for 2-3 months is a long time. Like, it is never going to happen. And the process is lengthy. It is a very long process. It does take like a year from the day you start to the day you actually hear that you have been accepted, right? And what happens in my experience is that while these students are waiting for that good response from AmeriCorps and on the other programs, something else comes in, right? Because they do apply to different things, right? And so while they are waiting for the full year to hear from AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps, they get accepted in law school, they get something else, and then they give up on Peace Corps. That's what I have heard. For the most part, as I speak, I have this friend of mine's daughter who wants to go into Peace Corps, and she has been waiting for a year due to the pandemic, but the application process itself was very long, has been very, very long, and so she's about to give up already. So I don't know what your experience is about that, but that's what I hear from my students and people that I know. Okay. Okay. So another question is there any way that we can streamline the information for the students? Anyway, maybe you already know. And you, Bunmi, you mentioned that you have the rackets in your office where students can go and pick up the information. In my days in university, Yeah, the office, that office of study abroad had all these catalogs, right? Brochures that you would go and pick up them, but nowadays it is online. I can tell you my university doesn't have those brochures anymore, right? I don't know what they did with those. Are you aware of that? Is there a place online where all those programs are? I do, and I have to say, I want to say thank you to APSIA, because I do get, I don't know, I do not know about you, but I do get 2-3 times per week an email from Carmen with all these opportunities, which I then forward to my students and people that I know in Miami, down there in Miami. So what's your experience about this?
The age of the internet is good and bad, right? I mean, like, you have all this information and you have all this information, and it's really hard to sort out what's for you and what isn't for you. And I will also give kudos to APSIA. I think they do a great job of aggregating information on their website. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that. I will also give a shout out to Bunmi's alma mater, Columbia. They have a really nice page that aggregates a lot of resources. But it can be really overwhelming. So I think the message is just, just sort of, just start and keep on going. I mean, that's really just, and I think the other thing to tell students is don't be afraid to reach out to people in places and ask them questions. I mean, that's why we're here, right? You all know that
Right.
we're all here to help students find their way. And so I don't think, curiosity and persistence will get them a long way. So just don't be afraid, because I completely concur that the information is just a flood.
Right.
I agree. And I'm actually I was trying to drop it in the chat, but it's not pulling up my computer files. But Carmen, I'm going to send you an email. We have, it's a 2-pager that we give to Howard students that includes by class. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, various international affairs related opportunities that you should be seeking. And it's just 2 pages. It's not all of the things, but they are opportunities that are paid or offer some sort of financial, whether it's a stipend or payment for graduate school or whatever it is in there. So I'll shoot that over to Carmen, and Carmen, you're free to share it with the folks here. But I share that as a sort of streamlined one-stop shop. And I tell students, look, this is not everything. You do have to call, you may have to Google, you may have to stalk some people on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to share that with everyone, but it's just a 2-pager that summarizes a lot of the great opportunities that are out there.
Yeah. Actually, I am looking here, this note in the chat, and this is great, at least for me. If you would like to request speakers and or material, visit PISA Network. Is that, who wrote that? Thank you so much, because we are very poor. The university I work for is very poor. We do not have the money to pay for the speakers, right? And I mean, coming to Florida, sometimes you have to pay for flight ticket, those things, hotels. We don't have that kind of money. Okay, so we had to invite for free those who are willing to talk to our students for free, or via Zoom, or before Zoom it was a Skype, those other internet connections. So this website is very good. I am going to try that. What do you think? I mean, do you have the money to pay for the speakers? I remember once there was this speaker which wanted to charge about $700 for 20 minutes to speak, right? And I say, well, I will pay myself, I mean, $700 for 20 minutes, I don't make that kind of money, right?
It's probably one of the things that, no, the few things that DC and maybe Florida have in common is we don't have any money here. We have another asset, which is called power, but money is, it's a little hard to come by. But one thing I wanted to a workaround or a cheat move, I guess is what the kids call it, that a scholar put me onto is like, for example, the Wrangle Fellow bios or snapshots, we call them, are on our website for Wrangle and Pickering. If you go through their bios, you will see, or any bio, right, for that matter, if they're sitting in on a conference or something like this, and they get the bio of the speakers, if they just read, you know, those last few sentences where they talk about all the things that they've done, they'll come across programs that way, right? Like that's how I learned about Stimson Center. That's how I learned about Plowshares Fund. You know, there are just, if you look at just sort of where people are coming from, students can actually find like those like gems out there that maybe aren't, or this other one, Scoville, like like that's a very popular one, and they post the bios of their students who get into their program. So if you kind of look at bios, you can tell your students to read the bios of the people that they come across to get a sense for what people are doing, and then yeah, do a Google search or make a phone call to learn more about the program.
And as a cheap advertisement for tomorrow, I invite all of you to join us. My colleague Brianna and I will be talking about the different tools and resources that we have, all of which are free, but clearly, Manuel, first of all, we can totally be bribed by anything out of Florida. But if now that I know what the going rate is, we'll see. No, I'm kidding. But I hope you will join us tomorrow because we want to make this as easy and accessible for you and your students as we can. And yes, requesting speakers, requesting paper, all of that is possible through that website that I posted.
Awesome.
And I forgot to mention, if you are interested in having a Wrangle or Pickering Fellow come to speak to your students, you can reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat box. If I can't find someone, my colleague Patricia, who's been with the program basically since inception, she can identify a fellow. If you have a group of first generation college students, if you're from the Midwest and you want, you know, a person who's become a diplomat and they're from, you know, rural America or wherever, right, LGBTQI, whatever that is, we have a rich, diverse group of fellows, alumni and current fellows who are phenomenal speakers and can come out to speak to students.
Yes, one advantage of being small, like in my university, is that we can rally, the administration can rally around this particular student applying for a Rangel program. That's what we did. We got 2 professors and 2 administrators helping coaching this one student. And we would meet every Friday for an hour to coach that student, train her, you know, to prepare for the interview, all kind of possible questions and answers, right? Yes, I mean, I think that's part of the deal, the support behind the students, recognizing that the program is very important, very prestigious program, and at least for my university, having 1-2 students accepted is a big deal. I mean, we made a big deal out of that. So yeah, the support is also important in university, bigger universities. I think that support wouldn't be there. It would be harder, I think. I don't know what your experience is. Okay, so it is 4:45. So I give it back to Carmen. Thank you so much for your attention. And I see you Friday, tomorrow.
Before you all go, I do have one last question. I guess Manuel talked a little bit about helping students really feel brave enough to do this. And I guess my last point to each of you would be, what is your advice that advisors can take with them to know what student to challenge in this way, and maybe build a culture at the campus that starts to encourage others to think about themselves in that way? And Beth, I'm going to start with you because you made the mistake of nodding.
Thanks, Yeah, that's, I mean, right, I'm at this giant university with a million students. So, you know, it's a little harder to say, but I think oftentimes the students, right, the students with the academic credentials rise to the top and they get all the offers and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's a set of students that show their promise in what they do. Right. And so I think paying attention to the students that are really involved in organizations that would be relevant to, you know, international affairs or other type of public affairs can garner you some good candidates for some of these different things. So, you know, maybe take a look and see who's running those events and organizing those events and looking at those sort of issues. Because, you know, I know that the GPA contest is a real thing in college, and I think can make it hard for some students who stub their toe in a semester to feel like they're not viable candidates. And I hate that, to hold up really promising folks. So I guess that would be my thoughts.
Regan, how about any insights?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who, from my end, I hire interns in my position, but also as my experiences internationally, I would say people who hesitate thoughtfully. I don't know if that's possible. Like, put some thought into it. It's a commitment, and certain experiences aren't necessarily necessary. Peace Corps is great, but if you put some thought into it and you realize it's not for you, that's also better. That's better for everyone. And people who can hesitate because they need to think through it more, I think, are those who we should encourage to think through that process and help them with it. And it's just like, what are your concerns? Let's talk through that. And then, maybe look for those in your network who can address those concerns. So I think something Peace Corps did really well is they connected me with another Asian American Peace Corps volunteer from Guatemala. I was like, great, I have all these questions about what it means to be an American who doesn't look American for the rest of the world. What are your experiences? How can that relate to how I'm feeling right now? And if that helped me along the process. So I think that's something I would add.
That's great advice. Bunmi?
Yeah, as again, someone who was a college athlete, no one came to me and talked to me about any of these opportunities. And so I would put a plug in for people going to the athletic department at your school, if you haven't already done so, to talk to the athletic directors, the coaches. If your school is fortunate enough to have like a career person assigned to working with athletes, to use those spaces. And I think one thing as an advisor that's always helped me as I've been advised, is having someone who can draw out the parallels of my experience to the international affairs or whatever career. So again, being an athlete, you may not think about the leadership skills, the teamwork skills, the perseverance, the flexibility, the effective communication, but on all of those things you're taught as an athlete, service, right? All those things you're taught as an athlete, you don't necessarily draw parallels to the foreign service, but they absolutely are related to the foreign service. And so again, if it's not an athlete, maybe it's a student who has had to work at H&M for 4 years to pay their way through college. Like, that's dedication, that's perseverance, that's scrappiness, that's resourcefulness. So meet the student where they are and help them draw out those connections in a way that maybe they miss it because they're just trying to like get through college and get out on 2 feet. So I would say that that's probably, as advisors, the place I would begin is start with the athletes, and then second, help them draw out the connections between their lived experiences and whatever it is they're trying to do.
And we're here to help with that too. Thank you all so much for this. I want to put a quick poll, if it'll let me, in the field to gather your insights about the session. And I very much hope you'll join us tomorrow to talk even more about how APSIA can be of service to you as you try to be of service to your students. So thank you all. Thank you to our amazing speakers and Manuel for moderating. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.